Assignment 3.1 The Effects of Personality and Motivation on Performance. In this assignment, I'm going to be talking about the effects of personality and motivation on performance. Personality can be described as an individual difference in characteristic patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Psychologists state that motivation is described as the process by which activities are started, directed, and sustained so that certain needs can be met. During this assignment, I will be talking about the three personality theories, which include the trait theory, social learning theory, and interactionist theory. And I will then be reviewing two athletes and talking about what theories best suit them. Trait theory is a psychological approach to the study of the human personality. According to www.teachpe, a trait is a relatively stable, high, consistent attribute that exerts a widely generalized causal effect on behavior. Some examples of personality traits can include being shy, outgoing, arrogant, angry, relaxed, and so on. Eysenck is one of the most famous psychologists in our country, and the reasoning behind that is because he has his own theory on the trait. He considered that there are two main personality types, which he splits into two continuums, as shown in the diagram, and these were extrovert and introvert, and then you've got stable and neurotic. Introvert and extrovert were related to how sociable you were. The more sociable you were, the more likely you will be close to the extrovert side, and then if you were less social, then you'd be closer to the introvert side. If you had a neurotic personality, that meant you were emotionally reactive, and in contrast, if you were stable, that meant you were emotionally balanced. According to hubpages.com, extroverts are often more likely to be involved in group or team activities rather than individual sports, as extroverts usually gain their energy from being in a group, and in contrast, athletes who participate in an individual sport tend to be introverts as they gain their energy from being alone and performing as an individual. Giordano Naro was a psychologist that proposed his own trait theory. This was known as the narrowband theory, and within it he suggests that there are only two personality types, which are referred to as type A and type B personalities. Type A personalities tend to be impatient, highly strung, intolerant, and experience higher levels of stress. And then in contrast, type B personalities will be generally more relaxed, tolerant, and experience lower levels of stress. More in detailed analysis of the diagram is shown on screen. One of the criticisms of this theory is that some psychologists say that you can't be placed in individually just one of these continuums. You could have a mixture of both. However, from reading one article, it said that team sport participants are more likely to have a type A personality, as they feel there's a stronger urge for competition and may lack more tolerance towards the opponents, as they lack patience due to their games being competitive. And in contrast, athletes who compete in individual sports are more likely to have a type B personality type due to them being less social and relaxed, and also that they're competing alone, and therefore they're more tolerant towards their opponents, as there's probably a lot less tension between the two sides than what there would be in a team sports scenario. Friedman and Roseman were psychologists who came up with a theory as well that suggests that there are two opposing personality types, which were type A and B. Following a similar suit to the narrowband theory, type A generally suggests you're commonly more competitive, aggressive, and more achievement orientated, and then in contrast, B is generally known for being easygoing, less stressed, and indifferent, as shown in the image on the right. Now on to social learning theory, and we've got the Bandura's observational learning theory that suggests that people behave by observing others. During the Bobo doll experiment, which was a test carried out to see how accurate Bandura's observational theory was, from watching it, it was clear that the children who viewed the woman using aggression almost replicated her actions on the doll, and that helped to prove the legitimacy of Bandura's social learning theory. Bandura basically suggested that all behavior is learned from environmental experience, meaning that behavior of everyone is unstable, and that means it's subject to change depending on what you see in the environment and what environment you're in, and also the behavior is acquired through copying others, but only when reinforced. Bandura stated that the learning of the behaviour can only occur if 4 specific elements were in place, and the abbreviation of these 4 words was known as ARMD, a bit like armed. The A stood for the amount of attention paid to the demonstration or action. R stood for a mental image form that can actually be recreated. The M stood for having the skill level or ability to actually perform the action, motor reproduction. And the D stood for being motivated enough to complete or go through with the action. Bandura suggests that there are a few areas or reasons that would suggest why you are likely to copy or mirror someone's actions, and these include if they are the same gender as you, same age, have similar personality types as you, if their behaviour or action is morally correct, or if it's ethical to perform, if they play the same sport or a similar sport to you, i.e. a team sport, if it's a successful or beneficial action, and if the person who's performing this action is a role model to you. An example of when observational learning could occur is when watching a footballer, and then that player who you're watching pretends to be injured. Now, dependent on maybe your personality type, or if you believe that this is morally correct to fake an injury to gain your team time or to win a foul, you may be watching that happen and then end up replicating the same action when you play football yourself, as a social learning theory would have taken place. However, you may also disagree with the action and choose to not mirror the action, as you believe it's morally wrong, and that proves there are some criticisms to Bandura's observational theory. The interactionist theory is an approach used by psychologists to explain everyday interactions that contribute towards somebody's personality type. A psychologist known as George Herbert Mead was considered to be the creator of this theory. Typical characteristics of this theory can include that your traits are triggered by the environmental situations that you're put under. The interactionist theory involves a combination of both trait and social learning. The interactionist theory is based around your beliefs and attitudes towards a situation that you see unfold, and that is why you can behave in an unpredictable way, because you may react differently to different situations that occur that you're visualizing. Martin Schmatzig's view on the interactionist theory was that he believed that there were 3 different levels that related to each other, as shown in the diagram on the right. The theory suggests that there is an interaction between the environment and you as a person. The psychological core is about who you really are and what you believe in, your values and attitudes, and also your interests. If, for example, in football, your teammate got fouled in a bad tackle, your typical response may change because of the type of action that you've just witnessed. Possibly normally you may not react in any way at all. However, due to the severity of this tackle, you may be frustrated and show signs of aggression. According to www.reference.com, a typical example of where this theory is commonly associated with is regarding gender. Someone who is one gender will automatically, without knowing, elicit certain interactions that are associated with a man. Genders do not initially gravitate towards some topics over others, such as 2 females are more likely to openly speak. Where was I? Sorry, I just got interrupted. Genders do not initially gravitate towards some topics over others, such as 2 females are more likely to openly speak about their feelings compared to 2 males who would be less likely to. Interactionist theory is most commonly associated in sports during high-intensity moments, such as a penalty shootout in football. And this is because as a psychologist, you are more likely to be able to spot and identify the behaviour that will be shown. According to the BTEC National Sport and Exercise Science textbook, a quiet and shy character is more likely to celebrate scoring the penalty by screaming and shouting with the crowd, due to it being a high-intensity moment, and therefore influences their behaviour. Now on to the review part of the assignment, where we're going to look at Mike Tyson and Serena Williams. Starting with Mike Tyson, who is an ex-professional boxer who is from America and grew up in the state of Brooklyn. Mike Tyson was a very talented boxer who competed between 1985 and 2005. From watching the videos about Mike, I can infer and suggest that from his own quote, "By nature I'm wild, regardless of my mentality, that's just who I am," I'm able to suggest the presence of trait theory, and this can be backed up by because during his life he had committed many acts of violence and shown on multiple occasions acts of aggression. According to Eisenach's theory, I would place Mike Tyson in the choleric section of the diagram, as it's clear that his personality types revolves around being aggressive, active, and restless. From watching the video, I could also suggest that due to his upbringing in a state which was known for trouble and crime, I can also suggest the presence of observational learning, and I am able to suggest that Mike Tyson will have also witnessed during his childhood many fights and acts of crime that will have had an effect on the way he behaved, and consequently could be a factor as to why he chose to commit acts of crime himself and perform aggressive maneuvers, such as during one boxing fight biting the ear off of one of his opponents. Furthermore, I could also propose the presence of interactionist theory as part of Mike's personality. I am able to suggest this due to Mike's job role. He was put in high intensity situations regularly, a boxing match, and it would have been down to his beliefs and actions that would have determined his behaviour. The interactionist theory is a combination of both social learning and trait theory, and therefore, due to Mike visualizing and seeing regular fights and crimes committed and being born into the world with what feels like built-in aggression as part of his mindset, when he's put in the boxing ring, his behaviour will have changed, or will likely change, and therefore he'd become more aggressive and occasionally commit inhumane acts, such as the biting of an opponent's ear, or outside of the ring, being charged for assault. Serena Williams is an American professional tennis player who was previously #1 in the world. She was born in Michigan and then grew up throughout her childhood in Compton. She had a sister who was 1 year younger than her and also played tennis between them. They have been incredibly successful and won a total of 30 Grand Slams, of which 23 have been Serena's and 7 were Venus's. One of the most fascinating facts about the Williams sisters was that when they grew up and learned to play tennis, they were coached from an early age by purely their parents, William and Oracene. From watching the videos about Serena Williams, I can infer and suggest that the presence of trait theory within her personality, as this is because mentioned during the video, it was clear she became a professional. She wanted to become a professional because, according to Gianardo Naraban's theory, Serena Williams had a real drive and focus to achieve her goals, which was to become a world champion in tennis, and therefore she would, according to the Naraban theory, have had a type A personality, resembling the fact she is competitive and got a real drive to achieve, as she's willing to sacrifice her time and childhood to become the best. Also, in the videos, Richard Williams, their father and coach, had already, prior to the sisters being born, planned on getting his children to the top level in tennis, and therefore it would have meant that Serena and Venus's trait theory would have reflected the fact they had a drive to achieve and be competitive, as that's all they've ever known to be like. I can also suggest the presence of social learning theory, and I can back this up throughout her childhood, because almost every day herself, her sister, and her parents would collectively play tennis and learn to become better. So her behaviour would have been affected by this, as she would have felt the drive to become the best as she's visualising it, and in later life she went on to win many Grand Slams, further backing up the fact social learning will have taken place as part of her personality type. Furthermore, I am able to propose the presence of interactionist theory within Serena Williams' personality type. I am able to suggest this from watching the videos because Serena Williams, for so much of her life, has been put into a sporting situation where she's always visualizing the sport taking place and witnessing the competitiveness and drive to win from others. And trait theory would suggest that she had a type A personality due to her dedication to the sport, and therefore it's likely that her behavior can change during a tennis match environment as she becomes more competitive and really has a high desire to achieve her goals. That's the end of my assignment. I've got the bibliography at the bottom as well. Thank you for listening.